Invasive species are the organisms, which includes plants, animals, and pathogens that are non-native to an ecosystem, and they may cause economic or environmental harm to the human health. They also affect the biodiversity by declining or eliminating the native species through competition, predation, or transmission of pathogens. They also disrupt the local ecosystem and its functions. There are several ways that the invasive alien species can transfer, and they could either be intentional or unintentional. And one way is through human. And when people are traveling around the world and they carry so many goods with them, so those goods may have invasive species that could move around the world along with the people and goods, and that's how they can be transferred. Another way is insects, which can get in the wood or shipping crates and then just get shipped around the world. Some wild ornamental plants can also escape in the wild and become invasive. So one of the examples of the invasive alien species is the European starling, which was native to Europe, Asia, and northern Africa, but was introduced to Northern America and other regions for intentional purpose of controlling pests. Cost of invasive species. So there are three different categories of the effects of invasive species on the nature, and one of them is the provisioning services, which includes the effects of invasive species on water and foods. So the invasive species cost around $137 billion for US in 2019, and invasive species also reduce crop yield by billions of dollars. Yellow-starred thistle, one of the invasive species, cost California around 7% of all of its revenue from the active rangeland. IAS can also change the flow of water by increasing the length of its roots and by increasing its biomass and its transpiration rate. So increasing those lengths will actually increase the use of water in the invasive species, which will decrease the amount of water left for the natural species to use. Another effect is the regulating services, which includes pollination, climate regulation, disease regulations. And so one of the examples of regulating services is the aggressive Africanized hybrid honeybee that are a danger to human health, and they're chasing people perceived to be a threat great distances from the hive and inflicting large number of potentially deadly stings. Kudzu, introduced for erosion control, is a major economic liability in eastern U.S., smothering trees, homes, and telephone poles, as well as impacting the air quality. Cultural services include recreation and tourism, as well as aesthetic beauty. So a yellow-starred thistle has decreased the recreation values for western U.S. by lacerating the hikers, which is costing millions per year in the livestock for its value. And similarly, the red imported fire ant has cost billions of dollars in the medical treatment for stings, damage to electrical equipment, and crop losses across many southern U.S. states.
While invasive alien species can have many negative effects on environments, they can also provide many benefits. And these benefits are subcategorized into provisioning, regulating, and cultural services. The Melaleuca quinquennaria, which is also known as the paperbark tea tree, is an invasive tree species in Florida that really helps to aid in the honey production industry, and they can produce $15 million a year in profit in the U.S. And then the Acacia and Pinus invasive alien species, they supply many natural goods for production in South Africa, like stuff for thatching, lumber, and even medicinal uses. And then the Apis mellifera, which are the non-native honeybees in North America that originated in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. They really help in pollination for farmers and just all of our ecosystems in general. But that pollination for farmers results in $14.8 billion a year in profit. And then the Prosopis glandulosa is an invasive tree species in the southern Great Plains of the U.S. And this tree species aids in the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere, which can really help to decrease the effects of climate change. Alien invasive species can also have positive effects on cultural services, but these are a lot harder to measure just because there is a lot of individualism in the cultural activities that these would have an effect on.
Synergies and trade-offs of invasive alien species impacts. In South Africa, the introduction of woody plants invasive alien species increased the amount of firewood and charcoal with a profit of more than $143 million. And also over $300 million a year were made from forestry of all the trees. Despite this profit, $1.4 billion in water loss due to transpiration of the trees using too much of the water and not allowing for any water to downstream communities of poor people in South Africa. They were also the cause of up to 30% of the water supply being drained. In accordance with this, the government founded a government-funded program called Working for Water, which was started to remove the woody plants out of the environment and then try to fix the water problem that had occurred from it. In the Great Lakes, zebra mussels were introduced accidentally in some instances. Zebra mussels are filter feeders that increase the water clarity in most environments they are put into. In this case, the Great Lakes again. But they come with very bad side effects. Zebra mussels are a very fast-spreading organism that latches on to anything it touches. It cost over $69 million in damages to water facilities due to clogged intake pipes which would not allow fresh water to be circulated throughout the lakes. And it cost local government $320,000 a year to purify the water because of the horrible odor and taste that they leave behind by zebra mussels. They coat the bottoms of ships, beaches, and cause a lot of undue distress to tourism and to the local communities, and they are extremely difficult to remove because of their fast spreading capabilities. In Hawaii, feral pigs were introduced in order to provide for hunting and cultural reasons. They provide a good source of meat and, as I said, cultural and religious values to the communities of Hawaii. Even though those are both positive outcomes of feral pigs being introduced, they are also responsible for a loss of 50% of some nut crops and other crops due to their destructive tendencies. And they cost over $450,000 a year in damages to the national parks because they uproot ferns and they knock down trees, and when they knock down trees, they carve them out, and that provides moist breeding grounds for mosquitoes to breed, which then carry out deadly diseases throughout the island.
Scientists are really looking into different ways that we can learn to control invasive species because they can have a lot of negative effects on environments and native species. But what makes them so hard to control is while they can have the negative effects, they can also reap good benefits. So scientists kind of have to pick and choose what they want to keep and like what benefits that they're going to be cutting and stuff like that. But scientists use predictions to determine the invasibility and the impacts that a species might have on an environment. And then the best way to improve these predictions is just through long-term and in-depth studies that provide a lot of information so they can see exactly what is going on. But the most effective way to control an invasive species is prevention rather than management. So it's easier to prevent a invasive species coming in rather than it is to try to eradicate it once it is already in. So ways that they're trying to put this prevention in place is more thorough searches at borders for trade and stuff like that, and then fines and fees that really have already shown some benefits and effectiveness in providing the prevention. Right now, economic and social damages seem to be the in the forefront of most research in invasive species prevention and control, but it's likely that in the future the focus will shift more to environmental damage and global change due to the global environmental change that these invasive species can have on the environment.
At the top of the page, there are 3 invasive species found in Lexington called winter creeper, bush honeysuckle, and garlic mustard. The take-home message is that invasive species are appearing because of the environmental crisis of climate change, and it's important because many places sell these invasive species because they are aesthetically pleasing, and many are traded and shipped internationally, which makes them more common to spread throughout the world. And we care because they are common, and many ecosystems provide many supplies for humans, but if these invasive species take over, the supplies are no longer there because the species take over. Future directions is that people are going to enforce regulations on these invasive species, and then that there should be more inspections at international borders, and then more educational opportunities.